My name is Steven, and you're listening to my podcast about the Beltway / the DC Snipers. The killings. The first victim of the DC Snipers at approximately 7:41 a.m. on the 2nd of October in Montgomery County, just north of DC. James Martin was getting his groceries for his wife and 11-year-old son. Suddenly, a high-caliber bullet ripped through his chest, and he died within minutes. At the time of the murder, the police were confused. This was not the type of crime that one would expect in a neighborhood like theirs. In fact, it had never happened in this county, and would be an unexpected first, but definitely not the last. The police combed the area for any signs of bullet casings or anything of the sort, but they found nothing. No evidence, no clues, just questions. On the 3rd of October, the police were still investigating the murder from the day before. An emergency call came in, and then hit the Montgomery police where it hurt. A woman had spotted her neighbor bleeding on his lawn next to his lawnmower. The victim was Sonny Buchanan. He was the son of a former Montgomery County police officer. At first glance, it appeared that it was the lawnmower that cut him, but when the paramedics arrived, they soon found out that this was the same type of murder from the day before. Sonny had been shot through the chest. By the time he got to the emergency room, his body had been completely drained of blood. He did not make it. The case was escalating a little too quickly for the police to catch up and get a foothold on the perpetrator. Less than an hour later, at approximately 8:12 a.m., another emergency call came in. This time, a 54-year-old taxi driver named Prem Kumar Waklekar was pumping his gas when a bullet burst its way through Prem's chest. While the police rushed to the site of Waklekar's murder, within just 30 minutes later, another call came in. Sarah Ramos, a 38-year-old babysitter, was waiting at a bus stop at a bench reading a book. Then, out of nowhere, a bullet entered, shattered her skull, and exited through her neck. All of the victims died within a couple minutes, if not instantly. Someone was killing at seemingly random with no rhyme or reason for the kills. The perpetrator had crossed the race and gender lines, so the investigators could not create a profile for the killer's targets. In just 2 hours, 3 brutal murders had occurred, and the police were frightened, puzzled, and stunned at these heinous crimes. But the killings were not over just yet. A little over an hour, at exactly 9:58 a.m., a 25-year-old lady, Lori Ann Luis Rivera, was vacuuming out her car at a gas station when, too, a bullet took her life. At the news of this cold-blooded carnage spread fast over the residents, and so did fear. At around 9:30 p.m. that night, the killer took his final victim that day, Pascal Charlotte, a 72-year-old retired carpenter. He was innocently taking a stroll on Georgia Avenue, D.C. The investigation. At the end of the unbelievably bloody day, the police started to establish their findings. Every shooting so far had occurred within a 25-kilometer radius, or just over 15.5 miles. Every victim killed with a single high-caliber bullet, which indicated a couple things: that the killer was a sniper, and a highly skilled and tidy one at that. He would strike and then vanish into thin air, leaving nothing behind for the investigators. There was also no connection between the victims. While the killings were coordinated, they still appeared random. There was no discrimination amongst the victims: young, old, male, female, white, or black. No one was safe. There seems to be no motive. None of the victims were robbed. The police started to work with the best snipers around to try and get some insight on how the sniper was operating. They also deployed SWAT teams into the areas that had been hit and their surroundings. It was the suburbs. There was no woods to hide in and no tall buildings to shoot from, so the investigators concluded that the sniper must be in a vehicle. A witness had spoken about a white paneled truck in the area of the fourth victim that was killed. Immediately, the police started hunting down and searching through every white van. As the police were searching for the white van, the 5 bodies were taken in for autopsy, and in less than 48 hours, 6 innocent people were shot and killed with a single sniper bullet. And yet the police had no suspects, no motive, and no leads. The first major decision was to share as much information as they could with the public. Schools went into lockdown, armed guards patrolled the vicinity, and the first clues started to present themselves. The bullets had belonged to a long-range rifle, a weapon like a Bushmaster. A Bushmaster is a military rifle designed for one thing and one thing only. In the hands of anyone, even someone with little to no training, this weapon could be lethal. After the trajectory analysis came in, it confirmed that the person was shooting on the ground. This person was mobile, but that means there would be 2 individuals involved in the murders, one driver and one shooter. The press and the news instantly jumped to the infamous Al-Qaeda. There was no way to confirm this idea, but that didn't stop the press from stoking that fire. Lockdown and more deaths. It is now October 4th. The sniper changed their tactics and moved south of D.C. The victim was Caroline Sewell, a 43-year-old homemaker. She was loading her minivan from a craft store in Fredericksburg, Virginia, when she was shot by the cold-blooded snipers. As she lay on the floors, bleeding to death, she prayed that she would live for her 2 children. Miraculously, she did. This was the first survivor of the October attacks. Unfortunately, the police still had nothing. It was like they were chasing a ghost. Not soon after that attack, a tip line was published and was immediately overwhelmed by callers. At one point, the police department had received over 100,000 tips. The police were studying the shooters and noticed a few things, that the shootings had occurred near roadways and certain stores and were familiar with the traffic patterns in the area. So the police devised a plan to trap the sniper. They called it the concentric circle plan. Not very flashy, but you'll see why it's called that. It involved the immediate deployment of a response team at the ring of an emergency call. Once the call had been made, the police teams would set a trap consisting of a series of widening circles around whatever area the shooting happened. They would roadblock every exit and flood the premises with plainclothes operatives. Since the killer had shot someone down in Virginia, they had no idea when or where the killer could strike next. There was a debate about whether schools should stay open or not. So far, no child had been targeted by the sniper, so it was decided that the kids would stay in school. But they had to stay indoors, no recess. They believed that would keep the kids safe. On the 13th of October, a 13-year-old boy by the name of Iran Brown had been kicked off his bus for eating candy. His aunt had to bring him to school for the time being. She dropped him off at school an hour early because she was getting late for work. And that's when it happened. The sniper shot 13-year-old Iran Brown after he got out of the car. The aunt raced through traffic to get her nephew to the ER. Luckily, this boy became the second survivor of the D.C. sniper. At the time, the President of the U.S., George Bush, condemned the attack. It was apparent that no one was safe from the sniper's bullet. Even the FBI was on the case and was offering a $2,000 reward to anyone who had information concerning the shootings. While looking for more clues, by doing something what is called a forensic walkthrough, a slow and tedious walk shoulder to shoulder, searching for anything that looked out of the ordinary. While on this walk, they found a spot where it looked like someone had laid down, and a mysterious tarot card that had a direct message for the police. It read, "For you, Mr. Police Code, call me God. Do not release to the press." The police were going to honor their request of not leaking to the press. However, that was next to impossible since the day after it was on the front page of the Washington Post. More death and communication. On the 9th of October, 53-year-old Dean Myers was driving home on his way from Virginia from Maryland at around 8 p.m. that night. Dean had stopped to get gas when a bullet ripped through Dean's skull, instantly killing him. The police responded with deploying over 200 investigators to the case. On the 11th of October, Ken Bridges was also shot at a gas station in Virginia, when he too was shot and killed by the sniper. By the 14th of October, the FBI even took a hit. Ted Franklin and his wife Linda were loading things into their trunk. Linda, an FBI analyst, mother of one, and expected grandmother. Linda fell victim to the DC sniper, as did 10 others. In response to this, the FBI obtained the use of sophisticated spy planes with high-tech surveillance gear to hunt down the sniper. Also, the police were still in search of that white van. Eventually, on the 16th of October, hope appeared in the form of a witness. A man named Matthew Doughty gave a description of a Middle Eastern man taking a shot. He even reported he had seen a white or cream-colored van with a burnt-out rear light. Police immediately took this information to the public to be on lookout. However, 2 days later, a detective reviewing the surveillance tape from the hardware store, when they noticed that Doughty had appeared in the tape at 9:21 p.m., which was 3 minutes after the shooting had taken place, meaning there was no way Doughty could have seen the killer. Doughty was promptly arrested. Once again, the investigators were back square one with a bunch of time wasted. The sniper was trying to come into contact with the police through their tip hotline, but, as mentioned before, there were over 100,000 tips coming in at one point. So the killer started to get desperate. He started to worry someone else might take credit for all the work that he'd done. So the next time he called, he brought up an unsolved murder in Montgomery, Alabama. That shooting had happened earlier that year. He called the police and told them to look into that shooting, though the police saw no connections between their sniper and that robbery homicide. So the call was dismissed. On the 19th of October, Jeff Hopper and his wife Stephanie were driving to their home in Florida. They stopped not even 100 miles away from Washington to fill up their car and have dinner. After dinner, Jeff and Stephanie were walking back to their car hand in hand when they heard a gunshot. It took a moment to realize it, but Jeff had been shot in the abdomen. It took intensive surgery and 18 days for him to recover from the attempt made on his life. Jeff is now the third survivor of the DC snipers. In some woods near where Jeff had been shot, they found a bullet casing and a note tacked to a tree. The note was kept inside a Ziploc bag. The killer had made a huge mistake. Investigators found DNA on that Ziploc bag. Unfortunately, the DNA did not match anyone in the FBI database. In the note, there was a message. The killer was demanding money, specifically $10 million that would be deposited in a bank account. The sniper also said that at 6 a.m. he would call the same restaurant that Jeffrey Hopper was shot. On the morning of the 21st of October, the phone finally rang, and now the police and the sniper were in direct contact. He told the police to follow contents on the note, or more people would be killed. But before the sniper hung up, he left this gun-wrenching warning: "Your children are not safe." The police tracked the call to a gas station. The police even found a man driving a white panel truck. Turns out he was just an illegal immigrant who happened to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. The note also mentioned the Alabama shooting. This time around, though, the police broke through a brick wall in the case. It turns out there was a dropped magazine at the scene with a fingerprint on it that had not yet been processed. The fingerprint got a hit. A boy named Lee Boyd Malvo, a 13-year-old Jamaican. However, they believed the teenager was just an accomplice. On the 22nd of October, in the heart of Montgomery County, a bus driver named Conrad Johnson, 35 and a father of 2, was preparing for his morning commute when the killer added another life sentence to his charges. The killer also left behind another message that read, "Your incompetence has cost you another life." the FBI started digging into the kid, Lee Boyd Malvo, which uncovered that there was a custody battle between Malvo's mother, an African American man, and an African American man named John Muhammad. The FBI, constantly filtering through their tips, found a very interesting one left by a man named Robert Holmes, one of John Muhammad's friends. It was a tip to the investigators that John Muhammad had the motive, the skill, and even the firepower to do the crimes such as these. His tip tied up all the loose ends. When Holmes heard the voice of the killer, he recognized it to be Malvo. Holmes also provided a possible motive. He said that John had lost a custody battle over his kids to his ex-wife, who had relocated the kids to Washington to get away from John. The chase was almost over. They just had to find the two men. The FBI had found comprehensive information on the two, even the car that was registered to John, a blue Chevy Caprice. The police immediately went to the public for this information and to be on the watch for a blue Chevy Caprice. Capture. A day after the police put out the warning, October 24th, Whitney Donahue was working late when he was too tired to continue and decided to go home. The time was 11:39 p.m. and home was still hours ahead, so he turned on the radio to stay awake while driving when he heard the announcement that the police were on the lookout for a blue Chevy Caprice. When Donahue turned on the Route 70, he decided to stop at the rest stop on South Mountain. That is when he saw it, a blue Chevy Caprice. It perfectly matched the description of the vehicle that the police were looking for, so he pulled up in front of the car and called 911. Lee Malvo and John Muhammad were fast asleep inside when the full force of the police descended upon them. 21 days after the brutal killings had started, it was finally over. Trial. It was found that Muhammad had trained Malvo to commit these crimes. It was also found that they had shot 6 people between February and October. They had modified the Caprice so that Malvo could lay in the trunk and shoot while Muhammad was behind the wheels. Malvo refused to talk at first, but when he started talking, he started to brag. He talked about how he would fast before each killing because it would improve his aim. And the last nail in the coffin is when he started talking about his relationship with John Muhammad. Sometimes he would call him father, and the other times he would call him his best friend. He said that John had taught him everything that he knew. Investigators concluded that the killing spree was a twisted plot by John Muhammad to kill his ex-wife and get his kids back. He was going to include her into one of the random victims, therefore giving him a path to reclaiming his kids. In court, John tried representing himself, but in 2004, John Muhammad was sentenced to death by a Virginia court. On the 10th of November, he was executed by lethal injection. Lee Boyd Malvo was sentenced to 6 life sentences 2 years later in front of a Maryland court.